The previous Friday was one of those stormy ones when the rain beat impatiently on the windows. My name is Emily Carter, and what transpired in room 207 that afternoon is something I will never forget. The day had just ended, and the school was bustling with the pandemonium of students ready to get away for the weekend. I was among them, or so I thought. Mr. Thompson, our history teacher, had always been something of a mystery. He was in his early 40s, wore the same brown corduroy blazer every week and carried an old leather notebook he never let out of his sight. He had this aura about him, strict but strangely kind. He wasn't a kind of teacher who joked with students or joined in school events. He taught, graded, and left. No one knew much about his personal life, and most students didn't care to find out, but that day I found out more than I ever intended. As the lights flickered and the intercom announced an early dismissal due to the worsening storm, students poured out of the classrooms like a flood. I grabbed my things in a rush, eager to beat the traffic and the downpour, but halfway down the hallway I realized I had left my sketch pad in history class. It was important to me, filled with drawings and ideas for the art scholarship I had been working toward for months. Without thinking, I turned back. The hall was eerily quiet. Most of the teachers had already left, and the janitors hadn't begun their rounds yet. Room 207 was on the second floor, tucked in the back corner. I reached the door and found it slightly ajar. That was strange. Mr. Thompson always locked up. Before leaving, I pushed the door open slowly. The room was dim, lit only by the gray light seeping through the storm clouds outside, and then I saw him. Mr. Thompson was standing on top of his desk. I blinked, confused. Why would a teacher known for his discipline be climbing on furniture? He didn't initially notice me because he was reaching up into the ceiling tile above his desk and carefully pushing it aside. I entered quietly as his curiosity overcame me, and he pulled down a small shoebox covered in dust. I ducked behind the door and watched from the small space between the hinges as he opened the box with such care that I knew whatever was inside mattered deeply. There were old notes, photographs, and a school ID card, but it said Daniel Brooks, not Paul Thompson. My heart was racing because the picture looked exactly like him, but younger. Why would a teacher have an ID with a different name? Was he concealing something? My foot moved, and a floorboard creaked. Mr. Thompson spun around, his eyes narrowing, shouting, "Who's there?" I stepped out, slowly, feeling guilty. "It's Emily," he said, leaving my sketch pad behind. "I didn't mean to," he sighed, getting up from the desk. "You shouldn't be here." "I am aware that I just—" "What were you doing?" Before I could stop him, he glanced at the shoebox in his hands and then back at me. There was a lengthy moment during which I thought he would call for me to get detention or something, but he didn't shut the door. "If I tell you the truth, you have to promise not to repeat it," he added quietly to Emily. He sat down, set the box on the desk, and pulled out the ID, holding it between his fingers. I nodded and closed the door behind me. "I wasn't always Paul Thompson. A long time ago I was Daniel Brooks. I went to this school. I sat in these very desks." He began telling a story that sounded like something from a movie. Years ago he had been a student at the school, bright, ambitious, and in love with history, but he had been accused of cheating during the state academic competition. Someone had planted answers in his locker and no one believed his innocence. His scholarship vanished, and with it his dream of becoming a historian. I changed my name and left town, he said, but I couldn't let it go. I had to come back to reclaim what was taken from me, so I got a new degree, a new identity, and returned as Mr. Thompson. I sat in stunned silence. He had spent years building a life just to return to the place that had once rejected him. He wasn't just teaching history, he was rewriting his own. "Why keep it hidden?" I asked. "Because no one would understand. I needed to prove to myself that I was more than a false accusation." Today was the day I decided to finally let it go. That's what I was doing, putting it to rest. I looked at the items in the box, the photos of him with his friends, the handwritten notes from teachers who had once praised him. It was like looking into a lost life when the medal from the competition he was unable to participate in shattered outside, rattling the windows. Neither of us moved. "I won't tell anyone," I said softly. "I promise." He gave me a small smile. It was the first time I had ever seen a real emotion from him. "Thank you, Emily, that means more than you know." I retrieved my sketch pad and turned to leave. Just before I stepped out I looked back. He was sitting there, the box open in front of him, the storm reflecting in his eyes. The hallway was still empty as I walked out, but I didn't feel the same. I had just learned that even the most put-together adults carry scars. Sometimes they return to the very places that hurt them, not for revenge but for healing. Weeks passed and Mr. Thompson remained the same in class, but I noticed subtle changes. He smiled more, he started asking students about their interests, he even joined us for the school assembly one afternoon, clapping along with the rest of us. I never spoke of what happened that day, but every time I saw him I felt a silent bond, a secret shared, a story preserved. That afternoon my teacher didn't just retrieve a shoebox from the ceiling, he retrieved a piece of himself, and though no one else knew it, he had finally found peace. And that's what Mr. Thompson did in the classroom that day, not just something unexpected but something brave, something human.